Today, I'll talk about Mount Vernon, Virginia. Full detailed explanation of public transit, names, buildings and grounds, architecture and interior, history, preservation, legacy, and tourism. Go ahead. The first president of the United States, George Washington, and his wife, Martha, once owned Mount Vernon, a famous monument in America and the location of their former farm. The estate is located in Fairfax County, Virginia, along the Potomac River. South of Alexandria, Virginia, and across the river from Prince George's County, Maryland, it is situated. In 1674, the Washington family purchased land nearby. The family began expanding their estate in 1734, a process that was continued by George Washington, who leased the property in 1754 before buying it outright in 1761. The first home was constructed by George Washington's father Augustine somewhere about 1734, and the mansion was constructed out of wood in a rough Palladian design. Twice, in the late 1750s and the 1770s, George Washington added on to the home. For the remainder of his life, it remained Washington's home. The estate gradually deteriorated after his death in 1799 in the control of numerous succeeding generations of the family because the income wasn't enough to properly maintain it. The Mount Vernon Ladies Organization bought the home along with a portion of the Washington property estate in 1858 when its historical significance was realized. The house and the surrounding structures did not sustain the same level of damage from the American Civil War as many other homes in the Confederate States of America. The National Register of Historic Places lists Mount Vernon, which was named a National Historic Landmark in 1960. Although being daily accessible to the public, it is nonetheless owned and kept in trust by the Mount Vernon Ladies Association. George Washington established a more than 200-year-old custom by allowing visitors to see the house. I have no objection to any sober or orderly persons gratifying their interest in examining the buildings, gardens, and sea surrounding Mount Vernon, he wrote in 1794. The estate was originally called as Little Hunting Creek Plantation, after the neighboring Little Hunting Creek. When George Washington's forefathers bought it, the ship was dubbed Vice Admiral Edward Vernon, VIII, after the Vice Admiral who had been Washington's commanding officer during the War of Jenkins' Ear and had taken Portobello from the Spanish when Lawrence Washington, Washington's older half-brother, acquired it. Reference required, George Washington kept the name after inheriting the property. The current property is 500 acres, 200 hectares, in size, with the mansion and more than 30 outbuildings located close to the river. 8,000 acres, 3,200 hectares, made up the land when Washington lived there. Architecture. The current home was phase-built starting in 1734 by an unidentified architect under Augustine Washington's direction. The main door's off-center location serves as a reminder of its unplanned and staggered growth. The house is constructed in a loose Palladian style as it is seen now. The main block was a one-story house with a garret that was built in 1734. The roof was expanded in the 1750s to provide a third-floor garret and a full second level. The north and south ends of the house also received one-story additions, which were later demolished as part of the construction process. The current residence is 11,000 to 28 square feet, 1,000 to 25 square meters. The second expansion started in 1774. The south side was expanded with a two-story wing. A sizable two-story chamber was also constructed to the north side 2 years later. Around 1775, two single-story auxiliary wings were constructed. Through symmetrical, quadrant colonnades constructed in 1778, these secondary wings, which contain the servants' hall on the northern side and the kitchen on the southern side, are connected to the corps de logis. The colonnade's completion solidified the complex's traditional Palladian layout and created a distinctive cour d'honneur, known at Mount Vernon as Mansion Circle, which gave the house its imposing perspective. The secondary wings have gable roofs with dormers, while the cour de logis has a hipped roof with dormers. The cour de logis' significance is highlighted by its second story, two massive chimneys that pierce the roof, and a cupola that rises over the middle of the building. The cupola's octagonal focal point has a short spire that is capped with a gilded dove of peace. A similar cupola crowns the governor's house at Williamsburg, of which Washington would have been aware, and it is more in the earlier Caroline style than the Palladian and was likely added to improve ventilation of the enlarged attic and enhance the overall symmetry of the structure and the two wings. Since no architect is known to have created Mount Vernon, some claim that John Ayres, a well-known Virginia architect, was responsible. He also designed Mount Airy in Richmond County and the now-destroyed Payne's Church in Fairfax County. According to some reports, Colonel Richard Blackburn, who also created the First Falls Church and Prince William County's Ripon Lodge, is responsible. Bushrod Washington, George's nephew, was married to Blackburn's granddaughter and who was buried at the Washington's grave there. The majority of architectural historians think that only George Washington was responsible for the design of Mount Vernon, and all claims to the contrary are only guesswork. Interior. Most of Mount Vernon's rooms have been brought back to its pre-George and pre-Martha Washington condition. The bigger of the two dining rooms, known as the New Room, Washington's Library, the West Parlor, the Front Parlor, the kitchen, and a few bedrooms are among the rooms. Although the interior design adheres to the exterior's classical theme, the mansion's internal architectural characteristics, such as the doorcases, plasterwork, and moldings from the 18th century classical revival, are not always authentic to one particular era. They instead span from Palladianism to a more refined and later kind of neoclassicism in the vein of Robert Adam. The doorcases and surrounds of the main rooms are the outstanding examples of this variation on the classical style. In contrast to the hall and passageways, where the doors have broken pediments supported by an architrave, the West Parlor and little dining rooms have doorcases complete with Ionic columns and full pediments. The history of this chimney piece somewhat explains the home's understated overall design. Washington was initially hesitant to accept the present when it was given to him by English businessman Samuel Vaughan because he thought it was too fine and costly, I fear, for my own apartment and Republican mode of living. By utilizing the original color schemes and displaying furniture, carpets, and decorative items that are modern to the home, efforts have been made to restore the rooms and maintain the atmosphere of the 18th century. George Washington and his family's old items and pictures may be found in the rooms. History. Washington clan. The property from which Mount Vernon estate would be cut, initially known by its indigenous name of Epswasson, was acquired in 1674 by John Washington, the great-grandfather of President Washington, and Nicholas Spencer. A. Spencer, acting as the agent for his relative Thomas Culpeper, 2nd Baron Culpeper, the English landlord who controlled the northern neck of Virginia, where the tract was located, successfully patented the area. Lawrence Washington, George Washington's great-grandfather, received his father's share of the land after John Washington passed away in 1677. He officially divided the estimated 5,000-acre, 20 square kilometers, estate with Nicholas Spencer's heirs in 1690 after agreeing to do so with them the year before. With the September 1674 property gift from Lord Culpeper, the Spencers took the greater southern part bordering Doe Creek, leaving the Washingtons the piece along Little Hunting Creek. As payment for their decision, the Spencer heirs gave Lawrence Washington 2,500 pounds, 1,100 kilograms, of tobacco. When Lawrence Washington passed away in 1698, his daughter Mildred received the estate. She granted her brother Augustine Washington, George Washington's father, a peppercorn lease on the land for a year on April 16, 1726. A month later, Augustine bought the estate for £180, nullifying the contract. About 1734, when he and his family relocated from Pope's Creek to Epswasson, which he called Little Hunting Creek, he constructed the original house on the location. In the cellar of the current home, the ancient stone foundations of what appears to have been a two-room dwelling with an additional 2 rooms and a half-story above are still partially discernible, in order to allow him to relocate his family to Fredericksburg at the end of 1739. Augustine Washington brought his oldest son Lawrence, George's half-brother, home from school in England in 1738 and put him up on the family's Little Hunting Creek tobacco farm. Lawrence started purchasing property from the adjacent Spencer tract in 1739 after reaching his majority, age 21, beginning with a piece near the grist mill on Doe Creek. Lawrence prepared to go to the Caribbean to participate in the War of Jenkins' Ear after receiving a highly sought-after officer's commission in the regular British Army in the middle of 1740. When he returned home after serving under Admiral Edward Vernon, he gave his estate his commander's name.